A lot of businesses know something feels off. The team is working, the owner is busy, people are trying, tools are getting used, things still feel slower, heavier, messier than they should. And when that happens, people start fixing random stuff. New tool, new dashboard, a new hire, new meeting process, new other automations. Sometimes that helps, a lot of times it does not, because they are fixing movement around the problem instead of the actual bottleneck. In this video, I want to break down how to spot real bottleneck in a business, because once you find that, everything gets clearer. A bottleneck is the point where the flow gets constrained. It is the place where work slows down, it stacks up, waits too long, or depends too much on one weak point. That is the place I care about first, because a business can have a lot of issues on the surface. Usually there are 1 or 2 pressure points creating way more drag than everything else. The first thing I look for is where work piles up. Where do things start waiting? Where do leads to sit too long? Where do approvals get stuck? Where do tasks stop moving? Where does the team keep saying we're waiting on this part? That matters because the bottlenecks create waiting. Waiting is one of the clearest signals in a business. If work keeps arriving at one point and not moving through fast enough, that part deserves attention. And the next thing I look for is response time. Where does the business slow down in a way customers or leads can feel? How long does it take to respond? How long does it take to follow up? How long does it take to send the next step? How long does it take to move from interest to action? Slow response usually points to a flow problem. Sometimes it is staffing. Sometimes, a lot of times, it could be poor routing, poor visibility, poor ownership, or too much depending on memory. I look for update chasing. Where in a business do people keep asking what is going on? Where are the repeated questions? Did this lead get handled? Did the client send it? Did the payment go through? Who owns the next step? What stage is this in? Are we waiting on them or are they waiting on us? Those repeated questions are clues. They usually point to visibility bottleneck or a handoff bottleneck. The next thing I look for is owner dependency. This is a big one. What part of the business only moves when the owner is looking fully locked in? What information lives in one person's head? What gets delayed? When the second person gets busy? That is usually a bottleneck, because one person is acting like the router and the reminder system, the approval layer, and the context holder all at once. The setup gets heavy fast. Then I look at the customer side. Where does the customer feel friction? Where do they wait too long? Where do they feel confused? Where do they ask what happens next? Where does the experience stop feeling smooth? That matters because some bottlenecks show up inside first and some show up through the customer experience first. Both matter. If customers keep feeling the same rough edge, there's usually a process issue behind it. Then I look for repeated fires. What issue keeps coming back? What parts need saving over and over again? What keeps getting patched instead of solved? Because repeated emergencies are usually a sign that the real bottleneck never got fixed. People just keep working around it. That burns energy. To make this more real, here are some common places where bottlenecks show up. Lead handling is a big one. Leads come in, but they do not get routed clearly. Nobody responds fast enough. The source is unclear. Follow-up is inconsistent. The revenue slows down right at the point of where the business is at the top. Follow-up is another big one. The business gets interest. There is no clean system for the next touches. Everything depends on memory. Some people get a fast response, some do not. The deal goes off, cool off for no good reason. Scheduling can be a bottleneck too. Calls get booked, the handoff is messy, the team is out of sync, prep does not happen, reminders are weak, and no-shows are confusing or start creating a drag. Onboarding is another big one too. A client says yes, then the business gets messier when stress starts getting stronger. So documents can be scattered. The next steps are unclear. Internal tasks are not assigned cleanly. The customer has to ask what is happening. Now the delivery starts with friction. Internal handoffs are huge. Sales closes something and delivery does not. One has the full context, one team finishes a step and the next team does not. Now it's their turn to status in random places. Everybody's working hard. The movement is still rough. That is a bottleneck. Visibility is another one too. The business does not have a clean view of what is where, what is new, what is waiting, what is blocked, what is active, what is complete. People spend energy asking for clarity instead of moving work. Then there's approval. Sometimes the bottleneck is one decision one person has to approve everything, review everything, check everything, or answer every question. That can choke the whole flow. And the tricky part is people do not always call these things bottlenecks. Sometimes they just call these busy days. The same pressure point keeps showing up. It's probably more than a busy day. It's probably a structure. That is where people usually get this wrong. They treat symptoms like the problem. They say we need more leads when the real issue is slow follow-up. They say we need new software when the real issue is poor handoff. They say the team needs to work harder when the real issue is bad visibility. They say that everything feels messy when really one part of the chain is dragging the whole thing down. When I'm trying to confirm the real bottleneck, I ask a few questions. Where does the work wait the longest? Where does everything seem to depend on? What part creates the biggest relief if it gets fixed? What part creates the most frustration for the team? What part creates the most friction for the customer? What part keeps getting talked about over and over again? Those questions help narrow things fast, because once you find the real bottleneck, you stop spreading your energy across 10 different random tasks. Now you can focus. Now you can decide whether those points needs, what those points need, if they need a better process, if they need better ownership or better automation or better visibility, software, or more capacity. That is the move. This is where the businesses do not usually get lighter by fixing random small things everywhere. They get lighter when you improve the point that is constraining the flow the most. That is why bottlenecks matter so much. They tell you where the real pressure is. I try to spot the real bottleneck in business. I go over this in order. I look for this in where work piles up. I look for this where work responses slow down. I look for this in repeated update chasing, like looking for who the owner dependency is. Look for the customer friction. Look for the repeated fires. Then I ask what point seems to be constraining everything around it. That is usually where the real work starts, because once you can see the bottleneck clearly, it now stops becoming a guessing game. And once you stop guessing, the business gets much clearer and has an actually chance of improving real fast. If the business feels heavy and do not fix random noise, then you got to find the point where flow is actually getting constrained.